Welcome back to the Bearded Nerd Podcast. Today we're tackling a topic that every game master will face at some point: player conflict at the table. Now, I'm not talking about in-game rivalries. Those can be great for storytelling. I'm talking about real-life disagreements, arguments, and frustrations that can turn a fun night of gaming into an uncomfortable mess. Whether it's clashing playstyles, personality conflicts, or just straight up bad behavior, handling these moments with confidence and fairness is one of the most important skills a GM can have. So, how do you diffuse tension, mediate disputes, and ensure that everyone at the table is having a good time? You're in luck, because that is what we're diving into today. So, without further ado, let's get started. The first step to handling player conflict is understanding where it's coming from. Most conflicts at the table boil down to a few key issues: clashing playstyles, disputes on the rules, hogging the spotlight, metagaming, character versus player conflict, and then just overall disruptive behavior. To break that down further, some players want deep roleplay, while others just want to roll dice and hack and slash and fight. Now, having different playstyles isn't a negative, but if most of your players really want roleplay and one or two just want to fight everything, that may lay the groundwork for some conflicts if there is no discussions being had. Same thing with rules, right? We may interpret rules differently than others. Mechanics may be something that we're not used to in a homebrew setting. We may really want to focus on rules as written, but some folks may not like that. Some may actually enjoy a lot of the homebrew aspects of tabletop games. And of course, when one player is dominating the spotlight in the game, others may feel ignored, which may cause some resentment. And oftentimes, that may even cause rivalry, especially if the characters are being set against one another because of the story, right? There may be that real life tension that is underlying in the character tension. It kind of bleeds into the story. And obviously, metagaming has always been a problem, right? Using that out-of-character knowledge to influence in-game decisions. It may not be real-world knowledge, but it could be knowledge on how the GM likes to run things. Maybe you know that the GM loves dwarves, so therefore you start to play more dwarves and interact with dwarves more often and kind of steal that essence of the DM's favor to get more in-game favor. That may be a problem. And last but not least, disruptive behavior. A player may be constantly on their phone. They could be interrupting others. We saw it recently on a episode of Critical Role. I believe it was the Campaign 3 finale. It's been all over YouTube and podcast, but there was a little bit of disruptive behavior in the game. And sometimes people may feel disrespected. It happens. And I have a perfect example of this from my own experience. In 2020, 2021, when we were all coming back to a more, quote, normal way of life post-pandemic, I was gathering a new group of players to play in my homebrew game. I placed a message on Facebook, one of the Facebook groups of my local game stores, that I was looking for players. And some of my closest friends, we became close friends, signed up to it. We all met, and there were several of us who wanted deep role play. We wanted to explore the world, and we wanted enriched combat. One of the other players, though, came from a Warhammer background, so they wanted to make sure that they were having this really unique, I guess, combat style, right? They said that they wanted role play and exploration as well, but deep down inside, I could tell that they wanted some pretty extreme combat. They wanted intense combat, and pretty much only that. And just a preference, I'm talking Warhammer 40K and that kind of tactical style of combat, not the Warhammer RPG that is made by, I believe, Games Workshop as well. Anyway, we played for a while, and this particular player would literally do everything opposite of what the other players did. So oftentimes people felt uncomfortable, but they also felt frustrated. And the key to solving this was having a conversation with both parties. One side wanted to essentially distance themselves from this player. They wanted nothing to do with them because, not that they were bad people, but it was always frustrating to meet with these individuals. And this other player was picking up that vibe, and they just wanted to kind of hack and slash and just do the monster hunting style of gaming. So what I did was I split them up, and I said, okay, I'm going to run the same campaign, or rather separate campaigns in the same world. One's going to be roleplay based and roleplay heavy, and the other one is going to be combat heavy. It is going to have all the beautiful things that you or someone else would like in a monster hunting style campaign. And ironically, the group that was more roleplay heavy stayed for several months, even up to about a year or two, until we kind of parted ways. And then the monster heavy, combat heavy group had ran one session with me, and they dropped. They didn't want to continue just because of life. And that's totally understandable. So the lesson is essentially, before jumping to conclusions, let's figure out why the conflict is happening and then address it from there. Now, when conflict happens at the table, it's important to address it quickly and calmly before it escalates. The younger version of myself, at one point when my players were arguing on a mechanics rule and started using metagaming, because one of my players is extremely smart. He is a mathematician. He's extremely smart. He's brilliant. And I'm still friends with him. But what happened was that they were arguing so much and we were wasting time. And I personally started to get elevated in my impatience, right? My patience was just wearing thin, and I started to kind of lose it. And at one point I said, guys, we need to, and I used some foul language, some expletives, so to speak, and we need to make a decision, and XYZ. I said it in a way that everyone kind of immediately shut up. They were silenced, because I typically don't react that way. I didn't yell or scream or do any of that, but I definitely acted in a way that, now that I reflect back on it, I was not very proud of. So in order to avoid that, what I've learned to do is basically take these 5 steps. 1, I've learned to pause the game. If voices are being raised or people are looking frustrated, we take a moment to stop. We either take a bio break or just a break, and we take a moment to stop. From there, we acknowledge what the issue is. We address it openly but neutrally. We don't blame anyone. We don't point fingers. We just address what the problem is. Then we give every person a chance to speak. We let players explain their perspectives, right? We find that compromise or a solution when we give each other a chance to talk. And then we do just that. We find a compromise. We find a solution. We make a fair ruling, and then we move on. And then after the session, we do a check-in. If the conflict isn't fully resolved, we talk to the players privately, right? or we just check in and see how everyone's doing after the session. In any campaign that I run, if a player wants to partake in PvP, I have a rule of consent. Now, PvP in my campaigns, in my understanding, is everything from stealing another player's loot or items all the way to challenging another player character in a duel. I can see tension brewing when that occurs, right? It's not only a betrayal of character trust, but it's a betrayal of fun, right? It is someone is not going to have fun at the end result. So typically what I do is in session 0, I say, hey, we do not allow PvP unless both parties agree to it and I have that consent. And typically when it happens in game, where maybe people forget about it or people are just kind of riled up and are in the story and the narrative and they want to, challenge someone, right? I'll typically pause the game and I'll ask everyone just a simple statement. Hey, are you comfortable with this kind of PvP? Or do we need to take a pause and kind of discuss those limits? Once we've talked about it and everyone's cool with it or not cool with it, we just continue. If the party members are cool with it and the players are going to have a good time, I say, okay, hey, listen, y'all, this is just for fun, whatever. Y'all can battle it out. But in this, we're going to kind of cinematically run it where when you drop to 0 HP, you basically get, quote, knocked out. And then you're fine. You're still alive. You don't accidentally, destroy another person's character and now they have to create another character, right? We do something like that. You can kind of have it where they got into a fight via anime style and the one person defeated the other character. And then, they dropped to 0 HP, but maybe they were knocked out, right? You can just role play it however you want. But we agreed on that. And then we essentially are able to move on. So sometimes those conflicts can happen because of a certain expectation that was not set beforehand, but we are able to handle it via conversation and open communication. Speaking about player expectations, the best way to handle player conflict is to prevent it from happening in the first place. That is one of the reasons I emphasize a strong session 0. In a session 0, you can talk about everything that goes on in your game. You can discuss playstyles and expectations, right? What kind of game is this? Is this a roleplay heavy? Is this a tactical combat focused game? Is this a mystery campaign? What are the aspects or the playstyles of the campaign? And what is your expectation as a player? And what is your expectation from me as a GM? You can discuss house rules. How do you handle rules disputes? Are there homebrew mechanics in play, such as natural 20s? Not everyone has the same ruling on natural 20s than people do throughout the world playing TTRPGs, specifically Dungeons and Dragons. In my homebrew worlds and in my campaigns, when someone rolls a natural 20 on an attack, instead of doubling the damage dice, you actually roll for only 1 damage dice. Because what I like to do is I like to automatically give that player full attack points, so to speak, or a full die roll on that natural 20. So for example, if you have a weapon attack that deals 2d8 and you roll a natural 20, obviously it's going to be doubled. So you would get 2 full d8 worth of attack points or damage points, whatever you want to use it. So in this case, if you roll 2d8, you have 8 points automatically, and then you roll a d8. And then obviously if you have 2d8 damage and you roll a natural 20, then 2 of those d8s are automatic, right? It's 16 points, and then you roll an additional 2d8, right? So not to be confusing, but essentially it's just a way for you as a player to guarantee points on a natural 20, because how bad would it be if you rolled 2 1s by doubling the dice? Some people just double the damage, right? So if you roll a 2, it's 4. Or if you roll an 8, it's 16. Again, I have different rules because I want to guarantee that on a natural 20, you get some points in. But other people may not be aware of that. So you have to have those discussions. I'm actually going to have this discussion with one of my new players in my homebrew world where they're going to learn these things and they have to know it so that we don't have a player conflict, right? I talk about PvP rules, which you should be doing too, right? Is PvP combat allowed? Are there limits? You need to have that conversation. And then safety tools. If you use the lines and veils point of view or boundary system, then you talk about it. I don't know if I utilize lines and veils specifically, but I basically say, hey, there are things in this world that are extremely good, and then there are things that are extremely bad. So I can take it all the way to the extremely good, Care Bear fuzzy feeling, rainbows and glitter, or we can go horror themed. It's up to you as a player, but I provide those rules and I provide those safety tools because that allows me to basically tell a player or players, hey, what do you not feel comfortable with? These are the things I don't feel comfortable with. For example, I do not typically allow for explicit violence or sexual activity in my game. I do not appreciate it, nor do I like it, nor do I think it's respectful of those at my table, especially from a moral perspective. I've had players from all walks of life who are or were veterans and some who weren't. I've had players who've experienced emotional hardships and financial hardships and things of that nature where I just basically am sensitive to those things because I want to be prudent in how I run games. I want to be charitable and not in a demeaning way or derogatory way. I want to be charitable as in I want to be loving towards my players. And I don't want to remind my players of something that they went through in their past. I want this game to be a form of escapism. So I just always encourage open communication. And that's the second part, right? Players should feel comfortable speaking up if something bothers them. So therefore, you should lay the foundation for a game and a community within your gaming group that's open about discussing their problems or discussing things that don't make them feel comfortable. Everyone's goal at the table should be fun. Everyone should be having fun. That means the entirety of your group should be enjoying themselves, should be laughing, smiling, and again, having fun. It should not just be one person. So I like to establish a simple rule. If something isn't fun, we talk about it after the session. With that being said, when you are having your session 0, you want to set your expectations, like I stated earlier, but you want to talk about your clear-cut rules on turn taking. And if you're dealing with this problem now, I highly recommend that you implement a round robin rule to ensure that everyone gets time to act. Put a timer on your watch or on your phone and give everyone 10 to 15 minutes and go from there. For example, what I like to do is put 15 minutes on my stopwatch, and then I will address the player character by their character name and ask them, what actions would you like to take right now? And then I give them 15 minutes. They'll ask questions, they'll inquire, do whatever, but it's their time to shine. And then I move forward from there. There's also nothing wrong with reminding players that during an individual's time or session, right, this little 15 minutes that you create per individual, per quote round, it's a great way or great time rather to listen and engage. They don't have to necessarily be the main character at that moment, but it's a great time for them to listen to their fellow players, engage with the story, and perhaps even write down notes. That's a huge thing. Every game master would really appreciate players writing down notes because that way it means that you're really involved in the story. But if all that fails, you do have one tool that you can utilize, and that's the initiative order. You can utilize initiative for social interactions, very similar to what you would do in combat. However, you can use a particular stat such as charisma. Or what I would like to do, and what I've done in the past, is use just a random d20, a straight d20 roll, and whoever gets the highest is able to speak. And then you go from there. You're not adding any other bonuses. You're just utilizing the natural roll of the d20. Before we finish this episode, I really want to take the time to thank Patreon members, aka the Guild Hall, for supporting me in this podcast. We've had great topics and great submissions lately, and this is actually one of them. So I want to thank the awesome group of members on Patreon for supporting me. If it wasn't for you all, I would not be able to create this type of content. So if you've enjoyed this episode so far, be sure to subscribe to the podcast, but more importantly, check out Patreon, where you can get D&D 5e Pathfinder 2nd Edition content. You can also get world building content, and you get podcasts earlier than the public audience does. So link for that Patreon will be in the description and in the show notes. But again, thank you all so much for supporting me. This last part of the segment is about removing that problem player. Sometimes a player isn't a good fit for the group, and that's totally okay. But you need to make sure that you have those red flags noted so that you can remove them in a justified manner. So the red flag number one that I would be looking for are boundaries. Are they disrespecting boundaries constantly? Are they making others uncomfortable despite clear warnings? And you can use the baseball rules. Strike one, strike two, and strike three, you're out. The second red flag is constantly disrupting the game. If they're talking over people, ignoring social cues, then that is a sign that you have to pull them aside and have this conversation. Third, refusing to compromise. If you've pulled them aside, talked to them, and they are arguing with you or other players, and quite honestly, if they're just being a jerk, then that is when you need to remove them. And then last but not least, and certainly should be obvious, a red flag that you should definitely take and use it as a way to remove this problem player is if they are bullying or harassing others at the table. There should be no tolerance for that type of behavior, no matter your demographic, no matter your political or religious belief. Bullying and harassment is just something that you should never allow. I run a home game and I run paid games. And essentially, those red flags are applicable in both. And you may say, well, Brian, why? I get the paid games, you don't want to have those, but in the home games, is it easier or harder to maintain those? And I'll tell you, no. I am just as strong and I emphasize those things in my home game that I would in my paid games. It doesn't matter. But those 4 red flags are something you need to really have in order to kind of require the removal, right? It's like you have to have one of those things checked off in order to justify removing them. So if any of those players, hopefully you have good players, but if that has ever happened or is happening to you right now, this is how you take this situation in a respectful manner. You pull them aside privately. You don't call them out in front of the group. You pull them aside privately and you speak to them directly but kindly. Tell them why it's not working out and give them examples. Tell them that you want to focus on the group dynamic as a GM and that's your job. Frame it as a matter of fit, not blame. Tell them, hey, really, or rather, in reality, you want this type of game, and I'm not able to provide that game for you. I don't think that your play style is a good fit for this group. And then you offer an alternative. You can suggest other groups or one-shots that they may enjoy. You can recommend other GMs. Or, like I said earlier, you can create a one-shot or a different campaign where this player can maybe bring their friends in that have similar play styles. But again, if they at any time check off one of those red flags and are bullying or harassing or refusing to compromise, so on and so forth, then you offer the alternative of helping them find another group. And that way they are on their merry way and you don't necessarily have to deal with them. At the end of the day, conflict at the table is inevitable, but how you handle it as a GM makes all the difference. The key is to recognize issues early on, address them openly, and set expectations ahead of time. A good GM doesn't just run a game, they create a space where everyone can have fun. What's the toughest player conflict you've ever had to deal with? Well, let me know in the comments. I love to hear your stories. And if you found this episode helpful, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and keep rolling those dice. But with all that being said, much love, be kind and compassionate to one another, and as always, keep gaming.